if I called you and give me a helping hand? Would you come catch me if I fell down towards a bitter end? You wanna talk about it, you couldn't live without me. You know you had your chance, it's over. So just go on, I don't wanna care anymore. There's no more between you and me, so just go. There's nothing left of us. I wouldn't hold you against it if you were to leave my side. I wouldn't cry if you left me, but I would feel betrayed. You wanna talk about it, you couldn't live without me. You know you had your chance, it's over. So just go on, I don't wanna care anymore. There's no more between you and me, so just go. So just go on, I don't wanna care anymore. There's no more between you and me, so just go. There's nothing left of us. So just go on. So just go on and leave. So just go on. So just go on and leave. So just go on. So just go on and leave. So just go on. I don't wanna care anymore. There's no more between you and me, so just go. So just go on. I don't wanna care anymore. There's no more between you and me, so just go. There's nothing left of us. Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes.
That feels good. Wonderful. Got my pims. Hi friends, I hope you enjoyed that little Colombia highlights montage. Everything in that little montage was in exactly the order that it happened. I love making those kind of things to like cheesy, uplifting music because it just makes me feel really nostalgic and good about looking back at my trip as a whole. This is a Colombia reflection video. I wanted to call it like Colombia the reunion, like Love Island the reunion, where they all meet back up in the UK. They all talk about the show and what went down, except the difference here is that I was solo traveling, so this is a reunion of one, and that's me. I really hope you enjoyed the vlog series. There is a playlist on my channel where you can binge watch the whole series from start to finish if you so wish. Obviously, because of COVID, my trip came to an abrupt end before I was planning on finishing it, which meant that the last episode of the vlog series just kind of comes to a sudden end, and I feel like I haven't done the whole series justice by giving it a proper send-off, so that's what this reflection reunion video is for. So let's bring it back to the initial plan. I left the UK in mid-December with my bags packed for a plan to backpack Colombia and Ecuador for about 4 months. So starting in Bogota, Colombia, my plan was to slowly make my way north through Colombia, then fly down to Quito, travel Ecuador, and then fly home from Ecuador. I know that plan already doesn't make sense, but that was the plan. Now, after about 5 weeks in Colombia, I think I was in Medellin at the time, I was chatting to someone about El Salvador as a country to backpack. Now, El Salvador is the only country in Central America that I did not travel to in 2015. And the more I was chatting to this person about El Salvador, I was like, damn, I really want to go. I started looking at flights to El Salvador, which were actually affordable and feasible. And a few weeks went by and I just could not stop thinking about it. It wasn't that I didn't want to go to Ecuador. It was just that El Salvador was just starting to sound so much more appealing to me. That's really all it was, but I started making provisional plans about how I could make this new plan happen. I thought, okay, well, since I'm traveling north, perhaps I can sail from Cartagena to Panama via the San Blas Islands, because I've never been there and I'd really like to go. And then from Panama City, I can fly up to San Salvador and then somehow slowly sift my way into Mexico and then fly home from Mexico. Luckily for me, I didn't actually book anything. I don't like to book anything when I'm backpacking just because of uncertainty, if unexpected things were to happen, and to keep my options flexible. I never could have predicted that it was going to be a pandemic that was going to spoil my plans, but that of course does come under the category of unexpected circumstances, so it was fine. Anyway, it's early March and I was coming up to my 3-month mark in Colombia, and I realised that I needed just a little bit more time to see and do the things that I wanted to, and I would be overstaying my visa in order to do all of those things. So when I was in Santa Marta, I extended my visa. It was a pretty easy process and it cost me, I think, just over £20 to extend for another 3 months. At this point, I definitely knew about coronavirus. It was world news, but it had not been declared a pandemic at this time, and so I was under no impression that it would be impacting my travels whatsoever at this point. And then, like, less than a week later, when I returned from the desert in La Guajira, everything changed. Well, at least everything on the outside world changed, which is why it was kind of weird for me at the time, because where I was, nothing had changed. Hostels were the same, restaurants were the same, everything was just normal. So it was actually really hard to kind of believe what was happening was true. Like, of course it was true, but because I wasn't living and breathing it, I was really just in denial about everything that was happening. Like, at first I was really just thinking, oh, this is not going to affect me. Next thing I know, I get a call from Cole, my good friend Cole, who said,
Christy, El Salvador's borders have closed.
And I'm like, excuse me, what? Is that a thing?
Yes, it's a thing, and it's happened.
Still, I was in denial though. I was like, okay, well, I'll just stay in Colombia and I'll go to Cali and I can carry on my dance lessons, I can join a Spanish school there. And I did a live stream on YouTube at the time talking about my new plans like this. But then literally less than 24 hours later, I was on the phone to my mum because the FCO had changed their rules and said,
all foreign tourists should get home as soon as possible.
Okay, shit, this is real. Let's start looking at flights home. When I first opened Skyscanner, flights home were saying that they were around £300. Amazing. Let's book, that's a good price. But no, that absolutely was not the case. As soon as you tried to click through and actually book these flights, the prices were going up to $1,300. And I was just like, this is absurd, this is not in my budget, I can't do this. But my mum was saying,
just book it, you need to get home.
So I was like, okay, bite the bullet, I'll spend that amount of money. Tried to book, the flights were literally selling out as I was clicking on it. When I went back to the landing page, prices had gone up to £3,000. Who has that? Who has £3,000 to burn on a flight home? Not me. Anyway, I did manage to see one for the next day for £1,500, and I just thought, let's grab it. That's the cheapest price I'm gonna get. Let's just go, go, go.
Sold to the dirty backpacker who needs to get home.
If you want to find out how my journey home was, you can click the video up here, and that's how my trip ended in mid-March. I do feel really, really grateful that I did manage to do as much travel as I did. After La Guajira, I was planning on going to Minca, and then I was also considering doing the Lost City trek before heading to Cartagena and sailing to Panama. So I didn't have too much left of my trip. So let's talk about the glorious 3 months that I did have in Colombia, and I asked you guys on Instagram what questions you specifically wanted to know. So that's how I'm going to structure this, by answering your questions. So firstly, did I have any preconceived notions about Colombia? I think the only thing I preconceived was that it could be quite dangerous and that I may be offered drugs a lot. What surprised you the most? Did any place disappoint / exceed your expectations? So I was pleasantly surprised that this was actually not the case at all. A lot of Colombians are actually ashamed of the reputation that Pablo Escobar has given their country, and they stay well away from drugs. Nowhere disappointed me, but I definitely say that Cartagena is the most overrated place. I'm gonna get so much hate for saying that. It's lovely. Like, it's a beautiful old town, but there's just not that much to do other than like going expensive shopping and being bombarded with street sellers normally trying to rip you off. And the nightlife is good in Cartagena. But I just thought, considering it's many people's like top hotspot in Colombia, there are many other places which I thought were way more fun and had a lot more to offer. But going back to safety, I got a lot of questions on this topic. Is it safe to travel Colombia? Did you feel safe as a solo film or traveller? In short, my answer is yes, I did feel safe. However, I have a lot more to say on this topic, and I'm going to be making an entire video dedicated to safety tips and advice in Colombia, answering all of your questions regarding that, because there's a lot more depth that I need to go into. What was the best secret gem place you found that most people don't know? I have to say the waterfalls that Cole and I hiked to in Jardín were particularly special. There was literally not a single other soul to be seen for miles, and the nature was incredible. Most underrated place or place that surprised you the most? Well, Jardín for sure, even though the walks absolutely knackered me out, it was well worth it. And I think Salento is underrated. I just thought there was so much fun stuff to do in Salento. It's just stunning, and I think it's overlooked by a lot of people, especially a lot of people who kind of just stick to Cartagena in that region. What was my favourite place? I've got to say, I think I was most happy when I was sipping coffee at 7 AM at the deck hangout area in Isla Roots Hostel Island. It was just bliss. What was your favourite memory? I think just the whole experience of learning to salsa is definitely my favourite memory. Favourite hostel? That's hard. I don't have a singular favourite because I stayed in some magnificent hostels on this trip. Colombia had some really great hostels. Selena in La Candelaria in Bogota, Los Patios in Medellin, obviously. Isla Roots Hostel, the Journey Hostel was really nice outside Tayrona National Park, Costeño Beach Hostel, and the one I stayed in Palomino, the Caso del Pavo Real, was amazing as well. Many amazing hostels. What was your favourite area with the least tourism? I'd definitely say the Bahia Malaga National Park, so over on the Pacific coast when I was staying in Pacifico Hostel. Not many backpackers who visit Colombia visit the Pacific coast, but I just think it's well worth it. It wasn't even that far out the way. What was the most difficult / challenging part of the trip? I found leaving Cali really hard. I was really settled there, I'd made loads of friends, I'd stayed there for like an extended period of time, so pulling myself away from that was really difficult, but I knew that I wanted to, you know, start moving around the country. What was the worst / hardest day? Probably the second day that we had in Rincon was a really shit day. I was with Cole and his wallet had just been stolen. We were staying in like this local homestay. It wasn't even a hostel, it wasn't a hotel, and we think that someone came up to our balcony and stole his wallet, and it was obviously pretty devastating for Cole, and we spent the entire day being stressed and trying to look for it. We also couldn't get a bus out of town. It's super remote and it was like a weekend and the transport wasn't running, and we just wanted to leave. And on top of that, the day before was the day I found out that Caroline Flack died, and that news really knocked me back and upset me mentally. So that day was just, it was a really bad day. Worst hostel, hotel, and why? Generally, I choose my hostels very carefully, and I do tend to spend more on nicer ones. So I didn't have any particularly bad experiences in hostels on this trip, apart from relentless snorers, but that's not the hostel's fault. So now we've got some questions about things in Colombia. So how was the food in Colombia? It's okay, like pretty basic. Like, in restaurants, generally the local dish is to get a menu del dia, which consists of a soup for starter, and then you get your main meal, which is just like rice and meat and plantain. And I mean, I don't think it was anything special, but I'm not a foodie. I'm not very good at commenting on food. How was the coffee? From a proper barista, fantastic, as you'd expect. But the instant cheap stuff, which you get in most places, Café Tinto they call it, no me gustaban. Is it hard for vegetarians to eat out in Colombia? I don't think so. I'm not vegetarian, but there was always a vegetarian option available, and particularly in the cities I came across quite a lot of vegetarian restaurants as well. What was the wildlife like in Colombia, i.e. mozzie, snakes, spiders? I cannot recall seeing a single snake or spider on my trip, but mozzies, oh my god, yes. Look at this screenshot from a video in Costeño Beach. I got bitten to death on my ass in a hammock in Palomino. brutal. Best time of year, in your opinion, to travel Colombia? When I went was wonderful weather-wise, but in early January it was still the Colombian holidays, which meant that a lot of the times the hostels were fully booked, which made it difficult to be spontaneous sometimes, so I'd say maybe mid-January to April is good. Did you ever feel that Colombia was getting too for the gram while you were there? Sometimes, yeah, but only in particular spots, like in Cartagena and in Tayrona National Park, but I didn't think it was half as bad as somewhere like Bali. I felt like the majority of places in Colombia are still very unpretentious, which is really nice. How available is fresh drinking water? Good question, as that's something that I wanted to know before I left as well. So in the mainland cities like Bogota, Cali, Medellin, generally you can drink from the tap, but you do just need to check with the hostel that you can drink from the taps there, because some of them you can't. It doesn't taste the best, but you won't get sick. But in other more rural areas, and also pretty much all the way along the northern coast, this is not the case. You cannot drink the tap water, and you'd have to be pretty lucky if your hostel provided free filtered drinking water as well. I didn't find that all too common. So having my Grail water bottle did end up coming into quite a lot of use in the end, but that's not to say that I was able to use it the whole time. Like in some places like Guajira, there wasn't even running water, and so I was buying plastic bottles, which killed me a little bit, but you've got to be hydrated. I think that Colombia still has a long way to go in terms of reducing their plastic consumption. Moving on to some itinerary questions. Do you think you planned the right amount of time to see the country? Yes, definitely, and I think that I could have travelled to all the places that I did in a much shorter amount of time as well, but I was stopping a lot to get work done in particular places. Now, I've had a few other questions on itinerary, like if you only had a limited time in Colombia, 2 weeks, where would you go? How long would you recommend backpacking Colombia? Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be answering all of these questions in my big budget breakdown video. I'll be talking about some different realistic itineraries and how much they're going to cost, so look out for that video. Moving on to some questions about Spanish. Is it essential to have a good understanding of Spanish? In short, no, it's not essential, but it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So I was on the bus and I was overhearing a British couple who clearly could not speak a word of Spanish, and they were having some troubles with the bus driver communicating, but essentially they just said, we want to go to Minca. So the bus driver was like, oh, okay, Minca. And then when it was their time to get off, the bus driver was like, you know, you get off the bus. It's your turn. Like, there's a way around things, and also Google Translate is always there. You can do it not knowing Spanish, but it's not as enjoyable. It's a little bit more frustrating. I highly recommend just learning the basics before you go, because that's just gonna really, really help you. Una pregunta, would you like to see me make a video of the basic phrases that I think you need to know in Spanish as a backpacker? That's definitely a video I can make if you want it. Let me know in the comments below. How much did your Spanish improve while you were there? Quite significantly. Obviously I did a week of Spanish school at the start, which I'm so grateful for. I learned so much in that week, like so many rules of how the Spanish language worked, so that really helped me. And then along the course of my trip, I was picking up new vocabulary here and there, which I could apply to the rules that I'd already learned. Something that I still really, really struggle with is my listening though. Spanish people talk really, really fast, so I'm still all the time like asking people to repeat what they've just said, but a lot slower. Were you ever in a situation where you felt uncomfortable / uneasy due to language barrier? Not uncomfortable, but sometimes a little frustrated, but that's when Google Translate comes to the rescue. Next lot of questions are about who can travel to Colombia. Would you recommend Colombia for a first-time solo traveller? I'd be lying if I said it was the easiest place I've ever travelled, but it's definitely not the hardest. Is there a certain age you recommend being before travelling Colombia solo? Honestly, at whatever age you feel confident. It is all about confidence. I came across the occasional 18-year-old backpacker, but I'd say generally the lower age range of backpackers was 23. And if you're not a naturally confident person, the question is, can you fake it though? I genuinely don't think I'm a naturally confident person, but I've been so used to faking it for so many years now that I've kind of taught myself to be confident. I don't know if that makes sense. Most people are not super confident when it comes to things like solo travel, but you've got to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, that initial time, fake it till you make it, fake that confidence in order to make things happen. And a few questions about some of my personal experiences. So, on your other trips you did scuba diving and free diving. Why didn't you do it this time? Main reason is because there wasn't anywhere super accessible for it. Most of the best dive spots that I was aware of in Colombia were on specific islands which were quite out the way. You can go diving in Tayrona National Park, but I genuinely didn't even see any dive schools. No one was talking about it, no one was recommending it to me, so it just wasn't at the forefront of my mind, to be honest. Biggest surprise you did not plan for? Having to leave early because of a global pandemic. Most spontaneous thing you did while you were there? I think my decision to go to La Guajira. That was all pretty spontaneous in general. Were you scared on the drive to La Guajira, driving into nowhere with a sketchy travel company? No, I wasn't scared. I'm always matter of fact about everything, and I always try to look at the worst case scenario. There, I was like, there's lots of indigenous people who are literally just sleeping in the desert here, so I can just join them for the night if I need to. I don't know, I just feel like there's always a solution to situations, so I never really panic. Which places did you skip and why? The first place that I skipped was the Tasicoa Desert. I meant to go after Bogota but before Cali. However, I'd already booked my accommodation in Cali and I realised that I didn't really have enough time and it would be a challenging journey, so I scrapped that one from the itinerary. There are a few other towns south of Cali which would have been cool to go to, places like Popayan, but it just didn't quite make sense on my route. There's a town north of Bogota called Villa de Leyva which would have been cool to visit, but again it just didn't quite work out with my route, and I already told you that I didn't manage to make it to Minca or do the Lost City trek either because of the pandemic. Where do I wish I spent more or less time? For the most part, I was really pleased with how long I spent in each place. That was the whole idea behind like having a flexible plan, so that generally I wasn't leaving places feeling disappointed. However, sometimes timing wise it just didn't quite work out. For example, I would have loved to have stayed another day or two in Guatape and explored that area more in San Rafael and done some hiking. I also would have loved to have spent another night or two at Costeño Beach Hostel because I only had one night there because I wanted to get to Tayrona National Park for a certain date. So yeah, I would have loved to have spent a few more nights there as well. Why did you choose not to spend time in Cartagena? I actually spent a total of 2 to 3 days in Cartagena. You just didn't see so much of it on the vlogs because I was kind of in transit and like I wasn't doing very much. I really just thought this is gonna make a boring vlog. I mean, perhaps I should have made a vlog there because it is an iconic place in Colombia, but I didn't think it was going to be overly interesting. What is backpacking Colombia like compared to backpacking other countries? Compared to Southeast Asia, for example, Colombia in the cities especially is a lot more Western than you might think, and it makes navigating on public transport really, really easy and enjoyable, and it's nice to be in a Western city that's also cheap. I like the fact that you have to speak Spanish. Yes, it's more challenging, but you get to learn a new skill, and isn't that what backpacking is all about? And there is a big backpacking culture in Colombia. There's plenty of hostels to choose from with backpackers from all over the world, making it really easy to meet people. Renting scooters is not a thing. Like, I think you can in some places, but it's really expensive and it's just not a thing that backpackers do. A couple of spots in the north, Palomino for example, it's common to get a motor taxi, but not to actually rent your own. And one of my favourite things to do in Southeast Asia is having that freedom on a scooter, so I really did miss not having that aspect of backpacking life. Why did you pick Colombia instead of, say, Peru or other popular destinations? It was just the first on my list. I still want to visit all the other countries in South America as well, but from what I knew of Colombia from research is that it was one of the cheapest countries. I knew it was popular with backpackers, and I love that as well as mountains and stuff, it also had the luxury of the Caribbean coast to enjoy as well. Where would you rank Colombia in terms of your favourite countries? Definitely in the top 5, I'd say. How does Colombia compare to Asia in regards to prices and style of backpacking? It's more expensive than Southeast Asia, but as far as I'm aware, it's still one of the cheapest countries in South America. Like in many countries in Southeast Asia, you're budgeting around £800 a month, whereas Colombia is more £1,000 a month-ish, but I'm going to be doing a video way more in depth about budgeting in Colombia. And in hindsight, is there anything you wish you'd known before going? Not really. Maybe just that I would definitely need a proper day bag from the start. If you've watched my unpacking video, you'll know what I'm talking about. Did you have any regrets apart from having to cut the trip short? No regrets, never any regrets. Backpacking is always a learning experience. Is there anything you would do differently? I definitely could have been smarter with my money at the beginning of my trip, but I'll get onto this more in depth in my budgeting video. Did your trip change you in any way? I think every trip I go on contributes to shaping me as a person. Meeting so many new people, understanding new cultures and different ways of life, living as others do, it changes you for sure, but I see it as more of a gradual life-changing process rather than particular trips giving me epiphanies. if that makes sense. Would you have still gone to Colombia had you known about COVID? Of course! If someone had have said to me in advance, right, there's gonna be a global pandemic in mid-March, then I probably would have been like, sweet, let's do Colombia for 3 months. But travel a little bit faster, so I managed to actually get to everywhere that I wanted to go. What are your plans after lockdown? Will you return and finish your trip? I would love to return to Colombia, not just to the places that I didn't visit before, but also back to the places that I really loved the first time. I don't think it's going to be the first place that I return to after lockdown. I don't feel like an urge to go back there and complete my trip straight away. Firstly, I just have absolutely zero clue when we're going to be traveling again, whether it's going to be this year or next year, or I don't even know. So I'm not making any plans. I have a few ideas of things that I might want to do, but I'm not setting my heart on anything right now. And that is it for this Q&A. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. Now, in terms of content that you can expect to see from me over the next couple of weeks, couple of months, as I've continually said throughout this video, there are a bunch more videos on Colombia that I'm going to be creating. To be specific, a big budget breakdown of Colombia and talking about different itineraries. There's also going to be like a recommendations and hotspots video where I'll be talking about each destination individually and what I liked and my recommendations in each of those spots. I'll also be making a safety video on Colombia, and if you want, I can make a basic Spanish phrases video as well, so you know specifically kind of what you need to learn before you go. If you want, let me know. And if there's any other videos that you'd like to see me make that I haven't already, please do let me know in the comments. I am open to your suggestions as always, and also a bunch of ISO diaries, so just home vlogs, things I've been getting up to in quarantine. I'm going to be interjecting those in there as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Would you come running if I called you and give me a helping hand? Would you come catch me if I fell down towards a bitter